Hello everyone, good morning. Sage here live from the 𝐊𝐴𝐴 studios, and you are watching a show where we share with you a glimpse of the Australian share market opening trade scenario, along with the global and domestic drivers triggering the market momentum. Well, in our first segment of the show today, we will look at how the early morning trades panned out, taking cues from Wall Street's action overnight. Then in the last segment, we'll look at prominent newsmakers grabbing the headlines during the early trading hours, as well as movement seen in cryptocurrency, crude oil, gold and metals indices. The Australian share market opened in the green on Wednesday as the US markets closed at an all-time high on Wednesday, and the top performing stocks in the ASX 200 today are Pilbara Minerals and PointsBet Holdings in the early trading session. The Dow Jones Industrial Average and the S&P 500 index closed at all-time highs on Tuesday as investors laid bets on economy-sensitive stocks amid excitement over the $1 trillion infrastructure spending bill passed by the US Senate in a bipartisan vote. The S&P 500 was up 0.10%, the Dow Jones gained 0.46% and the Nasdaq Composite fell 0.49%. The infra bill passed in a 69-30 vote, and it will pave the way for the government to allocate critical resources for building roads, bridges, railway tracks and other infrastructure projects. The lawmakers from both sides of the political divide had debated the bill for over several weeks. And meanwhile, the government said that COVID hospitalisation cases rose to a 6-month high over the weekend, with around 100,000 infections reported on an average for 3 days in a row. The grim COVID outlook may have dampened the spirits of the growth stock investors, and the tech-heavy Nasdaq saw a lacklustre session amidst the latest COVID update. Moving on now, the energy and industrial stocks were the top movers on the S&P 500 index, whose 7 of the 11 segments stayed in the green zone on Wednesday. The technology and communication stocks, however, declined. And coming up next, meme stock AMC Entertainment fell 5.86% in the intraday trading, despite a strong second quarter earnings report on Tuesday. Its revenue for the June quarter surged 2,253% year on year, much above Wall Street's expectations. Taking a look at the next stock, Canadian Pacific Railway. Canadian Pacific said that it raised its offer for the US rail company Kansas City Southern by $2 billion to $27 billion. However, the value is still lower than its rival Canadian National Railway's offer of $29 billion. Canadian Pacific Railway stock fell by 0.80%, while the Kansas City Southern surged by 7.39% after the news. And Canadian Pacific is a transcontinental railway in Canada and the United States with direct links to major ports on the west and east coasts. Also making the news, the stock of Smile Direct Club declined 24.27% a day after reporting its second quarter earnings. Its revenue jumped around 61% in the quarter, lower than the average analysts' estimates. And Smile Direct Club is a teledentistry company. The company was co-founded in 2014 by Jordan Katzman and Alex Finkel. It is based in Nashville, Tennessee, in the United States. Let's take a glance over now to the crypto world. And stocks of Coinbase Global declined 3.50%, whereas Bitcoin plunged 1.82% and Ethereum declined as well, 0.85%. And now we'll just take a short break, but stay tuned on 𝐊𝐴𝐴 TV.
Tune in to get the latest information.
Whether it's about market movements or the currency graph,
Sectoral coverage or industry news.
we cover it all on our news segments.
Be on top of the latest news
With 𝐊𝐴𝐴 TV.
Welcome back, viewers. Sage here, your host live from 𝐊𝐴𝐴 studio, and you're watching the early trades, where we share with you a glimpse of the Australian share market opening trading scenario. Let's move on now to the last segment of the show. Let us quickly look through the highlights of the prominent ASX stocks under the spotlight during the early trades. And the first one on the list today is Commonwealth Bank of Australia, that announced a record 6 billion Australian dollar share buyback and a doubling of the final dividend after its annual cash profit beat expectations. Shipmaker Austal is also making the news. They said that it had signed an approximate $32.8 million Australian dollar deal to design and build a 66-metre high speed catamaran ferry for the 𝐊𝐚𝐥𝐤𝐢𝐧𝐞 group of French Polynesia. Lithium producer Core Lithium also made the news, announcing a raise of 91 million Australian dollars from investors at 31 cents per share. And another mining services company, Mineral Resources, announced doubling of its final dividend after its underlying earnings surged nearly 150% during the year, boosted by record tonnes, revenue and profits. And moving on now to property group Arena, REIT said that its statutory net profit jumped 116%, while the net operating profit surged 18.5%. And looking at the futures and commodities space, gold futures were up 0.19%, silver increased by 0.23%, while copper rose 1.36%. And the Brent oil futures increased by 0.04%, and the WTI crude was up 3.04%. And lastly, we'll take a look at some updates from the bond markets. The 30-year Treasury bond yields were up 2.07%, while the 10-year bond yields rose 2.82%. And thank you for joining us on that report. That's all for now in the early morning trades. Stay tuned to 𝐊𝐴𝐿KIND TV as we have many more shows lined up for you, sharing live updates across the economy, markets and sectors. Sage signing off.